So you started doing stand-up at the age of 19. Is stand-up something you've always wanted to do?
Yes, yes. Well, I didn't know you could always do it. I first found out you can do it when I was 16. When I was a kid, I had very strict parents, so wasn't able to stay up late. And in 1985, we got a VCR. And I figured out how to program the VCR to record shows when I wasn't watching. And there was a show that would come on really late at night, like at 2:30 in the morning. And it was a stand-up comedy show. It would be like a host and like 3 to 5 comics, all doing a few minutes. And these were all like people that were not household names. I'd never heard of them. And then they would talk about, yeah, you can see him at this comedy club here. You can see her at this place. I'm like, whoa, you can do this? I'm like, I want to do that. So when I was 16, I got the bug. So I started writing jokes, but I was way too introverted to get out there and do it. So when I set a goal for mine. I was like, all right, before I'm 20, I got to do it, So when I was 19, I went down there to the club, open mic, and did it. I was supposed to do 5 minutes, and then right before I go on stage, the host says, "I'm cutting you to 3." And that's because the crowd was getting late and the crowd was leaving. So
and those first gigs, I mean, was World Champion fully born, or was he something that developed?
No, that came later. But within my act was always very joke heavy, and always very audience interactive heavy. I was always a fan of like some of my comics. I was at that point when I was really big fans of were Stephen Wright, and another one was like Don Rickles, and Rickles would play the audience a lot. Stephen Wright, brilliant one-liners. So those were two that I was really looked up to at the time. So the whole like more of a persona and attitude part of the World Champion that came years later.
How does the World Champion deal with failure? Say you don't get an audition, the gig doesn't go that well. How does the World Champion deal with that?
Well, the World Champion doesn't audition for anything. Things just come naturally. But if you're talking about me as a person for like auditions and stuff, like separate from stand-up comedy, if I ever audition for things, I try to to me, like, I hate the business. I don't like the business of show business. I like the art. And if you just focus on the art and just trying to do great work, then that can take away a lot of the anxieties and miseries and all that. In theory, it still happens, but in theory, that's what I try to do. I try to just focus on the art stuff.
So you do the stuff that you love. Are you ever in a situation in a gig where it's late Friday night, it's a bit of a rough crowd, and you sort of either taper it, tone it down a bit, move up a bit, or do you just do exactly what you do all the time?
No, there's because as a professional comedian, you are hired. Your job is to make the crowd laugh, and some crowds are dumber than others, et cetera. And so sometimes to do really well, if a crowd isn't too smart or too comedy smart, like they might be smart people, but their comedy brain is very, very low, I wind up doing some jokes that I wrote like 15, 20 years ago. And at the time, those were my best jokes. But at this point, they're much easier, simpler jokes. They're not nearly my better jokes. But sometimes a crowd that's not that bright, they'll love those jokes.
Okay.
But not like more recent stuff, which is much better.
Okay. And what happens?
So that goes over well. But yeah, inside you're just like, why am I doing this? I gotta not come back here. I gotta find better crowds, better clubs, better venues, whatever. Yeah.
And is that a dialogue you're having between Judah and the World Champion?
Yeah. That's just I think the World Champion's taking a break during that point, and it's just me. Yeah. So, but yeah, that stuff does happen. But so I always try not to. You always try not to pander, but and then sometimes you got to make a crowd smarter. You got to dig into them and lay into them for like wake up. And
so you're like an evangelical comedian.
What's that?
You're an evangelical comedian. You got to convert those.
Yeah, Well, yeah,
guys.
sometimes you gotta be, rough them up a little bit, and bang them around a bit, and not just, it's not comedy's not always polite,
Yeah.
and you gotta be like, you gotta rip them a bit and let them know they need to step it up.
What you're probably best known for is 30 Rock, Tina Fey's 30 Rock.
Yeah.
How did you get that?
That was an audition, and because a lot of people on that show, a lot of cast, the roles were written for them. I'd already done a lot of acting at that point. I'd done about 20 movies before doing that show, so I had a good resume, had one audition, and about 5-6 months later, I was told I got it.
That's brilliant. Because you play a writer who works on a comedy show. Have you ever been in that situation in real life where you're a writer working on a comedy show?
No, I definitely have colleagues and friends who have, and earlier in my career, I was being submitted to write on different shows, but at a certain point, I chose not to take that route because I would rather spend my time working on my own stuff instead of having to write for other people, and especially when it was stuff I didn't want to write.
Oh, okay.
Whether whether it's like, because it was often the stuff I was submitted for would be talk shows or certain sketch shows that really catered to a specific demographic and wasn't stuff I wanted to do. I want to like create my own art and not stifle that and spending all my time writing topical jokes about whatever pop star is considered stupid at the moment. It's like I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So.
Because I like the way you talk a lot. I'm noticing you talk a lot about your art.
Yeah.
It must be quite difficult, like doing art in
but
America, which is seen as sort of the big business place.
It is, and the other thing that's changed over the years in stand-up comedy is promotion. With the internet, with Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, it's like because America is a very big capitalist country, and in order to do art, you need to make money. So it's a direct conflict, and but sometimes you can create interesting things out of those, and so and that creates a lot of stress, that need to make money, because if you don't sell a lot of tickets, it doesn't matter how good your show was, that place won't bring you back, and in order to make money, you need to sell tickets. So it's funny, like when I was a young comic, me and my other comic friends, all we would talk about are what jokes we're working on, how to make them funnier, all that kind of stuff. Now, those same comics, whenever I talk to them, and it's not as much now, because when we were young, we were all in New York City, not making that much money, because in the U.S., most of the money to be made in stand-up is not in New York City or Los Angeles. It's doing the road. It's doing the other cities and touring. And now that we've all been doing it 20 or more years, none of us are just in the city every night. We're touring a lot. So all the friends that you were close with, you're now not that close to anymore. And when we do talk, it's hardly ever about the art of stand-up comedy. It's almost always, what were your numbers? How many tickets did you sell? How's that venue? Stuff like that. So it's all the business and not the art, and that stuff can really weigh you down. And you got to remember like why you got into it, and spend time to focus on that. And also, when you're young, starting out, you don't really have a career yet, so you don't have to. Your only thing you're working on is trying to get better. You don't have to travel every week and work all the logistics of that. You don't have to be concerned about selling tickets because you're only doing very small. You're doing rooms that seat 20 people. So so now there's a lot of other things to get together. So. It's interesting. Yeah. It's distracting, but it's interesting.
Yeah. So working on 30 Rock, what was it like working with Tina Fey and Alec Baldwin?
It was very good. Alec he's a great actor, and so you definitely learn a lot working with him. He's got great instinct, and he's a dynamic performer. A lot of charisma, and so that stuff can rub off on you, and you see it, and see how he does things. And Tina, great performer, but also, a great writer. The thing I learned a lot working on that show from a comedy writing basis was not so much the joke writing, but the organization that they would have of their jokes integrated with the storyline.
Okay.
And how the two would come together. And what 30 Rock would do is, our scripts were often 45 pages, and the show is 22 minutes. So every episode, if you just didn't edit any scenes out, they would have been like 28, 29 minutes. And then they cut it, and they cut it, and they cut it. So by the time it airs, it's joke, 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 joke. There's no fat in it at all. So that was like something like a comedy thing where I learned. Well, because sometimes that works, and with 30 Rock it did, and I've seen it before where it doesn't work, because sometimes you need some life in something, some breathing, not just machine, joke, 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 because sometimes funny things come that are not jokes. It's just, gestures and, awkward moments and stuff. But 30 Rock they really did it, the writers and producers just did a very good job of making it so lean, where every line meant something, and almost all of it was intertwined with the plot also.
Okay. So. You must have been tempted to write lines for your own character, no?
Yeah, every once in a while I'd come up with a line for me or for someone else. That was not the norm, though. That show was, probably 98% scripted.
Right, okay.
I'd say. And as the years went on, it became even more so. Season 1 was the least scripted. And I think that's because it was a new show, and the writers and producers didn't really know it as well. And then you come to know it more, and it became much more scripted.
You also worked on what I think is one of the greatest comedies of all time, Zoolander.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Zoolander.
What was that experience like?
That was trippy and bizarre and great. I had a very small role in that, playing Scrappy Zoolander, one of the coal miner brothers of Derek Zoolander.
The Merman Man.
Yeah.
That's so brilliant.
John Voight was the father. Vince Vaughn was the other brother. And we all had those Zoolander wigs on. It was really a great experience. I basically got to hang out and work with John Voight for a couple weeks, and that was great. And then seeing Ben Stiller there was kind of doing what Tina Fey does, because Ben wrote, directed, and starred in that, which is what Tina did. And I don't know how they do that. It's just so much
work.
So much work, and so much of your brain in so many different areas, because you have to be concerned about everything.
Where does Judah Friedlander begin and world champion end, or vice versa?
Oh, yeah, most of this is me talking, not the world champion talking. In some ways the world champion is, and the world champion's changed over the years.
Okay.
Initially, yes, and just changed. Initially the world champion was sort of making fun of people who are very narcissistic and self-congratulatory, and a lot of them. So at the beginning, it was kind of jokes like that, and then at some point, it morphed into kind of a hero, like a real-life superhero. Like nothing that I say are actually jokes about how great the world champion is. These are all just humble statements, but they happen to be amazing. Yeah, and true, and then recently, the past couple years, I've been doing a lot more jokes involving politics, social commentary, human rights. So the world champion has sort of taken this a little bit of a for the people, sort of anti-fascism and government and propaganda, rebellious kind of a stance, and so it keeps changing. It keeps changing. None of this is really overt. It's more subvert my things, because laughter is always my main goal. But I tried to have, thought in there. But the main, because I try to never be preachy. I'm probably sounding very preachy right now talking about it, but I don't know how else to do that. But
No, not preachy, just
Yeah.
nuts and bolts, incisive.
Okay.
You're
Yeah.
like a manual.
Oh, okay.
A brilliant manual. There's one thing that you're not world champion at, and that's
Yeah.
interviewing.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
But world champion, we have made you a special
Oh, all right.
world champion hat in Irish.
Dude.
World champion.
That's fantastic.
That is. You broke it.
No. I
Let's
fixed
see
it.
that. Oh wow! There
Yeah.
we go.
Winners, no winners. You are world champion approved.
Slauncher.
Slauncha.
Thanks very much, Judah.
Yeah, thank
Pleasure,
you.
man.
This is awesome.
Pleasure.
This is cool. Got a new hat. Yes.
Yes, world champion.
Yes. Awesome.